I wasn't affiliated with any political party during my study in the 70s, but I held the same opinions of the Abnaa al-Balad. I advocated one state in all of Palestine, a democratic state in all of Palestine, where Jews and Arabs can live together equally, without Zionism, without colonialism. This is my opinions all the time, but I didn't know enough about Abnaa al-Balad. I was still young, and then I met leaders who established Abnaa al-Balad in 1969. It started in Abnaa in al-Fahim as a local, as a national local newspaper, movement. Then it spread mainly into the universities. In the 70s, not as a decision, but you know, people everywhere were affected by this movement, by its principles. They were inspired to establish branches in different places without having central leadership for them. You know, each branch worked independently. And I myself established a branch in my village in 1980 by myself. And 4 years later, we collected all the branches, or invited all the branches. It was in my village. And we established what they call the regional committee. Regional committee, which is the equivalent of a central committee. So for the first time in 1984, Abnaa al-Balad became a centralized movement. We were a pan-nationalist movement, but also Marxist and pan-nationalist. Although there always, you know, there has been always debate within the larger international and communist movement, tension between nationalism and communism. But we thought that we thought that it is possible to combine between the two, because we are oppressed not because we belong to the bourgeois but because we are Palestinians. So this is contrary to the Israeli Communist Party, which focused only on the class struggle rather than on national struggle. From the very beginning, we thought that the struggle in Palestine is a national struggle. It's a national and democratic struggle. It's not a class struggle. The Zionist movement came here to eradicate the entire Palestinian people. They didn't come home to work. They didn't come here to liberate the working class from the Palestinian bourgeois, or from the Jewish bourgeois or the capitalist. They came here to destroy the entire people. Of course, there are contradictions within the Palestinian people. There were bourgeois. There were traitors also at the time, of course. But we think that the Zionist movement came here to establish a purely Jewish state on the ruins of the Palestinian people. They didn't even come here to just a common life for both. So this is why, I mean, this is we tried. So our movement, in fact, emerged as a response to the Israeli plans to denationalize the Palestinians in Israel, and also as a different way from that of the Communist Party, which focused mainly on internationalism, which is distorted even from a Marxist angle, in my view, because the Communist Party is a Jewish Arab. The Jews supported and advocated the Jewish character of the State of Israel, which is a nationalism, a Jewish nationalism. Why the Communist Party accepted Jewish nationalism and marginalized or sidelined the Palestinian nationalism? Why? That's simple. So this is why we focus on the national identity, not because we are the best people in the world, not because we hate other peoples. We are human beings and think we will believe in universal values, equality and justice and so. So I mean, Abnaa al-Balad was an Arab nationalist and Marxist movement. There were very few Jews in it. It is an Arab-Jewish movement, but it was known as a Palestinian movement here. 2 or 3 Jews only, but also it was a small movement, in fact. But on all the universities, the Israeli universities, we were strong. And you know, the young generation is dynamic and is ready to be in this radical movement. But as a result, this movement was very persecuted by the Israeli authorities, but it wasn't outlawed. It never, they used to, I think they were afraid of outlawing us because maybe some people would resort to violence. So we were given the outlet to express ourselves, but at the same time they were under surveillance, under under control. But we tried all the time to break the circle, to break through the circle that was drawn for us. We wanted to express ourselves and to do more than the Israeli authorities want. This is why they kept, persecuting us. So this movement advocated one state in Palestine, with the right of the refugees to come back. But what happened is in the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, the leadership of the Palestinian movement, which we always, as Abnaa al-Balad, consider that we are part of this. This was contrary to what's going on. This is not easy to say that, but at the time, we used to say that we are part of the Palestinian national movement, because the Israeli Communist Party said no, we are part of Israel, and the Palestinians want something else, but we show solidarity with the Palestinians. We want for them a state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. We said no, we are part of the Palestinian movement, we are Palestinians, we are integral part of the Palestinian people, we are integral part of the Palestinian national movement. So the problem happened to Abnaa al-Balad is when the mainstream in the PLO decided to adopt the two-state solution, and even less the problem became more acute after the Oslo Accords. After the Oslo Accords sidelined complete, or we were taken out of the solution totally. Oslo, it was for the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And suddenly we thought that, and after also the collapse of the Soviet Union, after the American war against Iraq in 1991, all this really spread despair, disappointment, frustration. And we thought at the time of creating a new formula, political formula, how to cope with the new challenges, because the international players, also the regional players, accepted that Israel is a Jewish state implicitly. I'm not saying explicitly, implicitly, because when you sign an accord with Israel without relating totally to the Jewish character of the state, without relating to the presence of 1.2 million Palestinians inside the Green Line, who are also suffering from structural discrimination and daily persecution. So that was a blow to our national movement, really. So, and at the time we started, because also that we thought that was a push to the trend of Israelization, that of inside the Green Line, Israelization. And the Communist Party, despite its important role against discrimination and racism in Israel, but the Communist Party could not really represent the most of the Palestinians. So this is why we wanted really to create a new formula which is different from the Communist Party and different from the Islamic movement. We are a secular movement. The Islamic movement has a different, its religious agenda, and the Communist Party has also a different, wants integration in the Israeli society without challenging the Jewish character of the State of Israel. They think that it is possible to achieve equality without countering Zionism, without countering the Jewish character of the state. And what we say that, okay, if the nationalist movement, if the Palestinian national movement or the mainstream decided, because of the imbalance of forces, because of weakness, because of impotence, decided that this is the only solution possible at the time, we want to say that we don't accept that. And this doesn't relate to us. We are now want to take our things in our hands inside the Green Line, and we want to defend ourselves as on the basis that we are part of the Palestinian people and that we are Israeli citizens. And for the first time, we decided to take our citizenship seriously. but not without, but with in combination with nationalist identity. That because even if you call for equality without focusing or adhering to the nationalist identity and aspirations, I think you will get you'll get nowhere. I mean, you wouldn't get civil rights, you wouldn't give national rights, because you can't be equal unless you become Jewish. Because in the Jewish character, what does mean Jewish character? Is that the Jews have privileges, that they have more rights than you. When say we are against the Jewish character of the state, we are not saying that we are against the Jewish majority. We are not ignoring that the Jews are the majority in Israel. We know, we acknowledge that they are the Jewish majority, but we are against the privileges, that's all. We want to live together, we want to live equally, but we want that the privileges be cancelled and there should be rights for you and for me on the lands, history and everything, politics and political domain. So, and for the first time we decided to push through. We said that, okay, the imbalance of forces forced the Palestinians outside to sign this agreement, but we Palestinians inside the agreement, we don't want to succumb to the imbalance of forces, because we are Israeli citizens. We want to be equal. How can be equal? Of course, we don't believe that we will be equal unless Israel cancels its Jewish character. But this is really, it is compass, it is a guide. You know, it guides you. It's challenging the Jewish character. It's trying to open the eyes of the Jewish society to the fact, to that that the regime here is racist, that the regime is not democratic, and not only that, but that the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza is an extension of the apartheid regime of the state of Israel. I mean that the source of occupation, the source of these policies is that the structure of the state of Israel. So this is why, for the first time, an Arab party comes up with this formula, with this equation.